On this video, we go through the steps 5 to 7 in one set. The reason is that actually the steps 5 to 7 are there to help on defining what needs to be changed, in which priority, and in which order. So it will help on planning to improvements. We start with a rooftop. Like you see, it looks like a rooftop, this green area. And the idea is to compare the different design requirements, i.e. the house, how to determine if they are in conflict or assisting each other. That means if there are some planned design requirements that actually are adverse compared to others or supporting each other. We look from each point from 3 different angles. We look at the different house compared to each others. This shows it better. So we have actually 4 symbols. Strong positive, which means that this planned requirements is actually supporting strongly some other planned requirement. Positive, that it supports. Negative, that is actually causing some kind of problems, adverse reactions in some other place. And strong negative, which is then really adverse effect to some other. So positive correlations occur when a design requirement assists or enables other, and negative correlation occurs when one design requirement adversely affects another. And there is on both there is 2 kind of levels, strong and less strong. Correlation matrix is something that you use to think about your planned technical requirements. You start always with thinking about negative correlations because they must be resolved. All that are especially strongly negative will really often lead to unfulfilled requirements. First objective should always be to think how we can make the conflict go away, how we can resolve this conflict. Is there something we need to change in requirements, but still keep the customer demands? Or do we really have to change the requirement? Resolving these conflicts usually requires some innovative solutions, which can really lead to a significant competitive advantage, like you have spoken in the previous training materials regarding innovations. Another option is a fallback approach. You have to make trade-offs. You have to think how we can remove this conflict, what we need to change in the requirements so that we don't have conflict anymore. And some negative correlations may be a result of conflicting functional requirements. Early resolution is essential to avoid schedule impacts, cost, or downstream rework. Some typical examples are like purchasing and operations. Purchasing can easily set goals to decrease the cost of some, for example, tools, which will affect adversely in operations when the tools broke off, don't do the work, and so on. And actually, typically, that kind of thing is more costly looking at the whole picture than focusing on the right things as a big picture. Also in sustainability and responsibility area, that kind of things might happen. Many times the top management sees the, investing to sustainability as a cost only. But in real terms, when it's done right, it can actually give more savings on costs, better results, improved operations, and so on. And of course, measures with a strong positive correlation should become part of the overall design strategy. We should focus on the things and find ways to do things that all planned changes and improvements will support each other's. Here is the example of loan processing. As you can see, there is one line empty. That is for you to think what you would select on those four squares. You see that all the previous work is there, including the competitor comparison. And this will now start to build you a picture that can help you on focusing on the right things. Like you see, there's quite many strong positive correlations, so you could start focusing on those, starting with the improvements related to 2 or even 3 areas. The next step is then to set the targets. When we have found out and defined which are the most important ones, we really have to start thinking how we measure the things, how we set the targets for those things. The targets are on the bottom. They're kind of foundation for the house of quality. The idea is to determine the necessary performance targets, specifics, for each design requirement. That will help then to really start thinking what it means in real terms of performance or cost or something that is measurable. Like in this water pistol example, you can see that there are measures like shooting far means the distance, and that is set to 30 feet in this case, so about 10 meters, no, 15 meters. Performance targets represent the level of performance that the team believes is needed to ensure customer satisfaction. This is really what needs to be done to meet the requirements, especially if they are critical to customer. They are based on customer needs. They can refer to Kano model to consider of the type of need that is being addressed. It can be based on design requirements, relative importance ratings, customer ratings of competitors and targets, correlation, and own capacity. As you see, basically everything you have done in the House of Quality this far, or QFD, is now taken into account. In this phase, the team does not yet need to determine how they are going to achieve the performance targets. This is now to set the targets. Later we think how we will do it. So here's again the loan processing example. If you really think what this picture tells you, you can see that there are quite many things. Like targets, now you have put different measures like 4%, 1%, and so on the bottom line on target area. Now look at the house of quality you've done. Think about what needs to be done, complete the roof, and if you don't have your own, use the one where we left this one row open. Fill it up and think why it is like that and what the whole picture tells you. You can again stop the video to do this exercise. The last step is the summarizing and analyzing the whole house of quality. So you have to think what are current strengths and weaknesses relative to the competition. How do these strengths and weaknesses compare to the customer priorities? Where does the gap needs to be closed? Where we have too big gap between the needs or expectations from the customer and what we do? Are there some opportunities to learn from the competition? Can we analyze the competition and find out that they do something better than we do? Are there opportunities for breakthroughs to exceed competitors' capabilities? These kind of questions can be answered using the house of quality. And we need to think also when we analyze the whole picture, are there any blank rows? If yes, how will we meet these customer needs? Are we neglecting something that is important? Or are there any blank columns? Does it mean that there are some things where we don't find really good design requirements? Or have we done some design requirements that are not necessary? Are there negative correlations that cannot be resolved, that should be resolved anyway? Are all the performance targets achievable? Can we really do them so that we can achieve the targets? Or are we making just nice wishes that nobody is really committed to? Part of the whole process when analyzing and diagnosing the house of quality is to perform a risk analysis. There is an FMEA tool for that, which is presented previously in these materials. So you have to assess the impact of failing to meet the targets and specifications. Think about what is the risk to the customer, what is the risk to the business, and again, when we think about sustainability and responsibility, what is the risk for the environment, for the society, and so on. You can also use the materials given to you, like project charter and problem charter, to help in this. For significant risks, you have to assess the likelihood of occurrence. There's also tools for that. Are the current competencies of the organization well matched to meet the performance targets? Do you need to increase some skills, improve some knowledge or something? For significant risks which could occur, identify which actions could be taken to reduce or address the risks. And always think what additional costs might be resulted from these actions. And then decide whether to proceed with the project or change it somehow to make it more feasible. This is shortly the first steps of QFD. So the first part is for product planning, when you have product requirements and customer requirements. Second is the actual product deployment, where you think about parts requirements, product requirements. Then you have to start thinking about the process in relation to parts. So you think about parts deployment, and finally then the process control requirements, when you think about the process requirements and process control requirements. You usually think that this goes hand in hand with the DMAIC process. And when you remember, for example, the 5 capitals model and all 17 goals for sustainability, sustainable development goals, you can see that they're all aligned with each other. So here you see why the name is House of Quality. It really looks like a house. And when you think, this is building the total picture of the needs. You have the customer needs, you have the customer satisfaction measures, you have relationship analysis, you have the product requirements importance, you have the product requirements, you have the correlations, and then you get the specifications for product requirements, for technicality. You can see the quality history and evaluation summary when you do it right. So this will really help you to see the big picture of what is needed to be done to improve. So the power of QFD is very clear. The customer's voice, the voice of the customer, is what drives all activities. So we really do something that is needed and wanted by the customers. QFD matrix makes a disciplined comparison between two series of items. It helps to develop processes in a logical, analytic way, and it has a selected critical aspects of any product or service. It do require, like said in the beginning, a cross-functional communication and teamwork. And of course, it promotes the quality product development. And again, product can be either physical product or service. So now you have gone through all the QFD things. If you are doing the group exercise, you should now be able to study the QFD you have done. If you are doing it by yourself, do the same thing. Review your house of quality and write down what you have learned about your product or service. And think where you could really use QFD. What advantages would it bring to you? And what problems you might have. That might help you in focusing on the right things also using QFD. There are also some quality function deployment videos in the materials so that you can learn more. Look at the additional tools and materials section.